Hello and welcome. You're watching Macros with Mythili, where we take a hard look at all the major macroeconomic challenges before the country. Well, one major issue that's come to the forefront during the past fortnight is labour market reform. The immediate trigger was the Rajasthan Cabinet's decision to amend three major labour laws: the Industrial Disputes Act, the Contract Labour Act and the Factories Act. Votaries of the amendment argue reforms have bypassed two key factor markets, land and labour, and unless these are reformed, we will not be able to create sufficient employment opportunities, and our much touted demographic dividend might become a demographic liability. Are they right to argue so? Are labour market rigidities, courtesy archaic labour laws, responsible for jobless growth? Well, I've got an eminent panel with me to discuss the pros and cons of labour market reforms. I have Sudha Pillai, former Secretary, Labour, Government of India, D. Raja, National Secretary of the Communist Party of India, and Mr. Jagdish Khattar, ex-bureaucrat and former Managing Director, Maruti Udyog Limited. Welcome to the show. Sudha, let me start with you. There's always this argument that there are three factors of production: land, labour and capital. Capital markets have been extensively reformed, but land and labour continue to be stuck in the old dark ages, as it were. So do we really need labour market reform at all, or can it be business as usual?
I don't think it can be business as usual, because in the first generation reforms that in recent history take us back to the 90s, labour reforms were actually tried and then abandoned. I personally have been kind of part of the attempts that were made to reform labour laws, and what has actually happened is that in the intervening years we have lost a lot of jobs and we've lost our edge in the manufacturing sector.
Mr. Raja, would you agree that actually labour market reforms are sorely needed, and the government did try and then was forced to backtrack? So do we need labour reforms at all, or can it be business as usual? Will these employment opportunities come automatically as economic growth recovers?
Actually, we should have a proper understanding of what we mean by labour reforms. Because what all the labour laws we have today, they have been won over by the working people. They were not given to them on platter. The working people fought and got these legislations. And these legislations will have to be relooked in some areas, because over these years many changes have taken place. My point is, the primary productive force in any economy is the working people. Whatever reforms we talk, they must be friendly with working people or pro-working people. That's how I look at these issues. It should not give an absolute independence to the employers to hire and fire the working people or employees, because that where I have problems with the amendments proposed by Government of Rajasthan, and let us see how they are going to discuss and how the Rajasthan Assembly is going to dispose them off, because given the strength of the present government in Rajasthan in Assembly, they can push through these amendments.
But the President also has to give his assent.
Yeah, President is likely to give. Then other states may follow it up. Then the centre will follow it up.
Okay.
Then it is going to be retrograde. Instead of reform, what we talk now, it will be retrograde measure against the working people.
Mr. Raja's point was that, labour has won these rights with a great deal of difficulty. And so any reform that has to be attempted must necessarily always be pro-labour. Now my question to you is this: do these amendments, do they have to, if any amendment has to be, does it have to be pro-labour, pro-employer? Can you not think of an amendment which balances the interests of both labour as well as that of the employers?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with Mr. Raja that we need reforms, but we need to look after the workers. I'll take a minute, give an overall perspective. I feel that we need to protect worker and not the job. That's very important.
Sure.
At the moment, what is happening is that we are protecting jobs, but not the worker. Now, what distortion has taken place? As she was mentioning, we have lost out. We have lost out in the manufacturing. Even in our garments and apparels, Bangladesh and Vietnam have overtaken us. Now, what has happened with the rigid reforms today? 20 years back, we had 90% regular employees, 10% contract. Today it is 70% contract, 30% employees. Who's benefiting out of it? We are creating classes among the workers. So I think because that flexibility is not there, to respond to the market condition is not there, all these distortions are taking place. We need employment, I don't have to say. Manufacturing is the one which can do it. So can we bring about some reforms which protects the workers? No, I have another problem in this. Why do we have, first of all, Mr. Raja was mentioning about the laws. I had a look at it. Most of the laws are pre-independence. There have been changes, amendments, but not on the core issues. They are required like this. So why do we have laws for a company with 25 people, 50 people, 100 people, above 100? This creates classes among the workers. I know in manufacturing you have on the same line person who is getting 20,000-30,000 rupees a month and another getting 10,000 rupees a month. Why don't we abolish all these and make everyone regular so that everyone gets the same? But along with that, if it is going to be everyone is regular, everyone gets the same, you need flexibility of responding to market conditions, and that is where the protection of the worker comes and not the protection of the job.
So you've been Labour Secretary. There's a fact that we have a multiplicity of laws, and even the most conscientious employer cannot possibly really comply with all of them. Why did you said labour market reforms were attempted and they failed? Why could we not have more success? And it's also a fact that Mr. Khattan mentioned that we're talking of protecting, jobs, because the organised sector is so minuscule. It's less than 10%. So why was government not able to reach out to the large mass of workers in general and say, look, these are reforms that are necessary in your interest?
You see, I think I should really take on from where Mr. Raja, left off. This word reforms is actually understood as the right-wing reforms, and the syncretic, or I would say the two sides of the same coin, which is that you look after the worker and you look after manufacturing, you look after jobs, you make sure that your economy is not hit by the kind of labor laws you have. That is actually very important. But when the minute we use the word labor, alarm bells begin to ring. We think of rigid labor unions, we think of militancy, we think of all manner of negative things. At the same time, when we think of reforms, the word reforms has also got fairly distorted. Frankly speaking, in the UPA 1, it was part of the common minimum program that there would be no automatic hire and fire. So those 5 years were gone. So in the
why couldn't they do anything about it?
You see, there was a lot of emphasis on social security, which is very said protect the worker. We really brought in a lot of very positive legislation, which I don't think we have the time to talk about. But the ESI law became very much more easy. It became more user friendly. Hospitals became better, and the unemployment assurance, that is half wages for 6 months if you lost a job, was actually expanded to make it 1 year. The Bonus Act was amended, Maternity Benefit Act was amended. In fact, the ceiling for workers was brought down in ESI Act. We also did a lot of work on the Employees Provident Fund, and we passed a law for social security for unorganized workers. So a lot of work was done on social security, but obviously it did not go far enough. And then there were workers, like some categories of workers who are highly skilled, who never felt the need for any kind of social security, who kept themselves out of the net. So and when bad times came, they were hit very hard. So we really need to look at 3 major laws. We do need to look at 3 major laws. And these also have a major psychological impact. And if I have a minute, I would say the number filter in our laws actually encourages a lot of, loopholes and a lot of violation. So we have a very peculiar situation where we have a lot of rigidity in the Factories Act and in the Industrial Disputes Law, but we also have a situation where the contract law has been so badly misused that you actually have a very inflammable and very volatile situation in many manufacturing units. So there has been, people have been looking at a de facto extremely loose labor law implementation regime. This is what is actually happening.
No, if I could just turn to Mr. Raja,
Yeah.
Sudha just mentioned that government did a lot to reassure labor in terms of extending the social safety nets, etc. Then why is it that labor seems to have, so many fears about any kind of amendment, and they see it always as being anti-labor?
I am happy that Sudha Pillai referred to the common minimum program of UPA one government, because that government was supported by the left from outside, and I was also involved in the framing of common minimum program. There is a categorical statement, no hire and fire policy, automatic hire and fire policy. Whatever reforms we think of, the trade unions will be consulted. Trade unions. Even in case of Rajasthan, I don't think that government consulted trade unions.
But the trade unions represent only such a small portion of the working population.
I am coming to that. I am coming to that. Because we have organized labor,
yes.
unorganized labor. I agree with him. Many laws, pre-British, pre-independence laws. But the earliest trade union movement started in 1918 in Chennai. Then AITC, All India Trade Union Congress, was formed in the year 1920.
Okay.
So since then we have been fighting for workers' rights and their protection, everything. Even now, we do not have a central legislation for agricultural workers. We have been demanding. She has referred to several security, social security laws or schemes, but there is no central legislation for the agricultural workers. Still we are fighting how to eliminate bonded labor, and we do not have a comprehensive law for domestic.
But we have a law for bonded labor.
No, we have law.
And
but
agriculture is a state subject,
no,
so the
we-
good states
we have law.
will set the example.
No, I agree with her. We have law for the abolition of bonded labor, but despite that,
Continues.
bonded labor continues. And this, what do you call, scavenging, manual scavengers, then we don't have a comprehensive law for domestic workers, and several sections of the unorganized labor, they remain without any law.
rights.
If we think of labor reforms, I am for labor reforms. Come on, let us discuss and let us have labor laws for all these sections.
Okay. Well, Mr. Raja, I'm afraid I'll have to interrupt you there at the moment, but we'll be back very soon. We have to slip into a short break. Welcome back. You're watching Macros with Mythili, and we're discussing labour market reform with an eminent panel of experts. So that if you were Labour Secretary tomorrow, as it were, what are the kind of reforms that you would suggest? Which are the key laws? There are so many legislations, but if you were to pick out 2 or 3 key legislations, would they be the same as what the Rajasthan cabinet seems to have agreed upon? And what kind of reforms would you want?
Yes, I would agree to what the Rajasthan government has done, because I think that's one way of making a beginning to prevent the contract law from being misused the way it is being misused. That's number one. Number two, let me talk about the laws that we actually, we almost introduced in the parliament, but were actually forced to withdraw at the last moment. And these relate to the flexibility and the electronic filing of returns.
Okay.
There is a number filter at the moment. It says only up to those that employ up to 19 workers can file a single return. We had actually prepared a bill, and it went through the entire motion of being vetted in the law ministry, but at we only could raise it up to 49. Our original proposal was to take it to 500.
Okay.
But we were forced to withdraw it because we thought it will, have a problem on the floor of the House. But I would, in addition to the 3 laws, Contract Law, the Factories Act and the Industrial Disputes Act, I would also look at the way we actually deal with security issues or safety issues. Let me distinguish between the minimum wages issue and the safety issues at work, because as we all agree, it has to be both pro-worker and I would say
Growth,
pro-growth, pro-job creation in a sense.
Yes.
Nobody wants to close his unit if he can manage to run it.
Absolutely.
But
Mr. Raja, I could see you shaking your head.
Despite my respect for Sudha Pillai, even if she is the Labour Secretary today or tomorrow, I can't agree with the amendments proposed by Rajasthan government.
Why? Despite the fact that it protects only a privileged section of labor
They are
force.
all retrograde and they are all against the labor. They give enough freedom to the employers to do whatever they want. If they cannot run industry, why should they be in industry? If they cannot run the industry.
No, that is why they need an exit option.
If with 20 workers, if they cannot run an industry, with 50 workers, how can they run an industry? What is the logic behind it? It is not the question of protecting jobs. It is question of protecting the worker who is the primary productive force in any economy. You were talking about land, labor, capital, everything. Capital and land cannot produce the wealth or surplus value on their own. It is labor which produces surplus value, which becomes the strength of economy. There, I think labor reforms, when we talk of labor reforms, what way they are going to be in the interests of the labor. She talked about contract labor. What is the law that
it's being misused?
Misused by whom?
By the
Why? The question
by
is
the
why?
managers.
Why? And
That's the point I'm making, Mr.
by
Raja. What I'm
The
saying
point
is,
is that if we've had these laws and despite that we haven't seen much growth in
That's the
jobs,
point I'm
then
making.
whom are we protecting?
see, basically, I'm happy that he agrees we must protect the worker and not a job.
Okay.
Once you accept that, many things fall in place.
Yeah.
Then we don't need distinctions. We don't need 10,
We don't
20,
need
50,
number
100.
filters also.
We don't need any filters. We
Yeah.
don't need any contract labor.
So would you agree with Sudha that these three laws definitely need
No,
to be
these three
changed?
laws are something to do with the process. I'm first
Yeah.
talking about the
Yeah.
bigger picture, that let us say that yes, workers are important,
Okay.
they must be protected.
Okay.
But because we need flexibility, we need efficiency,
Right.
we have to face competition.
We need
then
safety at work.
We need safety at
And
work.
we need
When-
minimum wages. We need living wages.
When all that is required, then we look into each one of the act.
Okay.
For example, she's mentioned that register, electronic register is not accepted. You have so many inspectors coming. Suggestion is, can we have one one report for all inspectors? Now these are procedural things. Something in the states, something in the center. All those things can be come out. And I'm saying that the industry will have no problem as long as they are given
No,
flexibility.
these bureaucratic procedural problems are not labor problems.
No, I'm talking, Mr. Raj, I'm talking about the acts that we have pre-1950 have not made any change. We have kept adding on to it the processes, and that has made life very difficult for everyone. So she has talked about Industrial Dispute Act. She has talked about
Factories
the
Act.
Factories Act, the Contract Act. Once we accept that whatever be workers will be protected, all workers are alike, I think things will start.
I
falling
want
into
to
place.
elaborate on the contract workers situation just now.
For
You
example,
see-
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sure.
No, no, correct.
You know, small little things.
Yeah.
Women cannot work
Yeah,
in the
at night.
evenings.
Section 6.
Why? Today, the whole industry has changed.
Sure.
Now you have, you are now dealing with countries where there is a time difference of 12 hours.
But on the other hand, you talk about overtime
No, no.
from 50 hours
Mr.
to
Raja,
100 hours.
No, Mr.
No,
Raja,
but you
I'm-
agree, Mr. Raj, that flexibility is very important in today's
Mr. Raja,
dynamic
all that
world.
should be done.
Flexibility is a relative term. Yeah, I will give my interpretation, the employer will give his own interpretation. So we must come to certain points. We must be realistic when we address the issues. Because in the name of flexibility, you want to give flexibility to the employers.
What are the three key things that the government should address? 1, 2, 3. In proceeding in the right path towards labor reform, what would you identify them
I
as?
think government will have to take a call on the exit option.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two, government has to step in to stop this widespread abuse of the contract
Okay.
law. And definitely, I think the Factories Act also needs. But I must tell you that all these amendments are lying ready in the Labour Ministry for the last so many years. That's the only ministry that actually engages in tripartite consultations and comes with draft laws.
Okay.
But those draft laws are still lying
Okay.
because they have not been able to move forward.
So, Mr. Khattar, would you hope that the present government would be able to push ahead with these reforms if the legislation is all ready?
See, let me put it this way. This country needs employment in a big way.
Sure.
And if everyone realizes that we need employment, and then you talk about demography and all, it's not going to come about with the manner in which we are working today. No one in the industry wants to be unfair, but because you have rigidity in the processes which we talked about, and 40 inspectors and blah blah blah, everything is there, that should be taken away. But if we want manufacturing to come up, and I must say that government is thinking, according to me, in manufacturing can come in a big way if we were to manufacture our defense equipment in India instead of outside.
Sure.
Or
Electronics?
उसमें employment ज़्यादा नहीं है. I'm talking about
Hardware? There is?
That is there. So, but the investment is huge. But in manufacturing of defense, you know, you have a core company, but then you have 3-4 levels, which goes down to so many levels, and it has a spread in technology. So, if we want to do that, we have got to have another look at our manufacture in our labor laws. Flexibility, competitiveness is important, but they must be protected. They should not be at the other end of the stick. And let us not get all these distinctions between contract labor and all these things. Let's deal them as one and give them all the protection. Give them protection, give industry the flexibility.
Would you agree with that, Mr. Raja? One final word from you. If labor's rights are respected, would you be open to looking at the labor laws again?
In fact, we have been talking about new work culture, and we have been telling the workers how they should follow a new work culture and how they should acquire more skills, more talents. They must be equipped. Everything we have been doing. But whatever labor reforms we discussed today, they cannot be done or carried out by employers and government unilaterally. There is a need for meaningful consultation with central trade unions, and they represent the working people, the laboring class. So government should be with open mind to consult the trade unions or the representatives of employees and workers. And you can't take everything in your hand and this
Raja,
is our
I have a suggestion. Why doesn't the union propose their own structure to meet these needs?
I agree with you.
Absolutely,
One is you consult us, you bring everything with us. I'm saying you.
I agree with you.
Mr. Raja, are we happy that there is...
Let's talk of the aspirational India which is looking for
I'm
jobs.
asking
So,
you,
Mr. Raja,
when Rajasthan government
you see-
this cabinet decided these amendments to Industrial Dispute Act, Contract Labour Act and others, did they consult trade unions?
Mr. Raja, my only point is, if we don't take it at an all India level holistically, then states will do it, and I think everyone will be the loser in that. So my suggestion would be, taking into account, I mean, let's face it, there has been no
unemployed
growth.
people actually.
Unemployment is increasing. Let the unions come forward and say, this is the minimum that we want.
You can't blame the working people or trade unions for unemployment. It is a very burning issue, very topical issue and important issue, and for which we will have to redefine our macro level economic policies. With the kind of policies which we have today, you cannot generate employment.
So
whatever
certainly
you may speak.
So I think on that note, we really have to come to the end of this program because it's been a very interesting discussion. But finally, the answer appears to be that we have to work in hand, labor, industry, as well as government. All three have to work together. Only then will we be able to get the jobs that we need to provide employment for all the millions in this country. Thank you so much for being with us, all three of you. Thank you also for watching. But we'll be back next week, same time, with yet another edition of Macros with Mythili. Till then, it's thank you and goodbye from all of us at ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.